On a hot July day in 1851, in the pine-shaded fields near Whiteville, North Carolina, a pair of sisters were born into slavery. Their parents, Jacob and Monimia McCoy, were already raising 7 children. But these new daughters, named Millie and Christine, were unlike any the community had ever seen. Conjoined at birth, they were connected at the lower spine and shared a single pelvis. But each sister had 2 arms and 2 legs. They stood at an angle of nearly 90 degrees to one another. From their very first breath, they would live every moment of their lives side by side, inseparable in body and soul. In another time, perhaps their story might have been private, but in the 1850s South, their lives were not their own. Because their parents were enslaved, so were they. And because they were different, they were quickly seen not as children, but as curiosities, and, more grimly, as profit. At just 10 months old, the girls were allegedly sold to a man from South Carolina named John Purvis. Their unusual condition made them valuable to showmen, and their childhood would soon become a blur of contracts, transactions, and exhibitions. By the age of 2, they were already put on display at the very first North Carolina State Fair in 1853. Crowds labeled them freaks of nature. For the managers who handled them, they were not little girls, but a ticket to profit. Over the next years, the twins were passed between owners, managers, and swindlers. One promoter even claimed to sell them for deeds to land worth $45,000. A trick that turned out to be nothing but a scam. They were carried as far as Canada and then across the Atlantic to Britain, where they were finally secured again by Joseph Pearson Smith, one of their earliest backers. By then, Millie and Christine had been forced into countless exhibitions, even subjected to medical examinations where doctors prodded and stared. But something remarkable began to happen. Under the care of Smith and his wife, the twins were given an education, something most enslaved children could never dream of. They learned to read and write. They were taught music and dance. They practiced until their voices blended in harmony, Millie's rich alto and Christine's clear soprano. They even learned to speak 5 languages. Their natural clumsiness as toddlers had turned into grace. Their sideways walk evolved into a flowing step that could pass for dance. Audiences no longer saw them only as oddities. Now they were performers. Crowds came to hear the 2-headed nightingale sing duets. They marveled as the sisters played piano together or moved in sync with uncanny rhythm. They toured the United States, Canada, and Europe, and even performed before Queen Victoria herself. In January 1863, their legal status as property ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. For the first time, Millie and Christine were free. Yet freedom came with a heavy shadow. Their bodies still made them a public spectacle. They still depended on shows and exhibitions for their livelihood. But now, at least, they could choose the terms. It is uncertain exactly when their pamphlet, The History of the Carolina Twins, was first published. Scholar Joan Martell, who later wrote a biography of the sisters, concluded that Millie and Christine wrote their first autobiography at age 17, published as History and Medical Description of the 2-Headed Girl in 1869. That pamphlet contained both their own words and a medical study of their anatomy. Still, freedom did not come cleanly. Their last enslaver, Mary A. Smith, did not immediately release them. In October 1865, their parents, Jacob and Monimia McCoy, appealed to the Freedmen's Bureau for help in regaining custody of their daughters. Bureau agents worried that Mrs. Smith might even attempt to take the twins overseas if she lost control of them. In the end, the Bureau intervened, and the sisters were reunited with their family. From there, Millie and Christine began to reshape their lives. With their mother by their side again, and still under the Smiths' guardianship, they were given structure, stability, and a platform to rise beyond exploitation. The the undated history of the Carolina twins that survives today. While authorship in that edition is credited to only one sister, the text is written in the first person plural. It even begins with their bold claim, "We are the greatest natural curiosities the world has ever had sent upon its surface." In its pages, the twins describe their birth, even noting that the midwife who delivered them was not sure at first if she was holding a child or something else. They recall their kidnapping without naming the showman responsible, and describe how their mother, Monimia's evident tenderness for them, helped win a legal case in England that restored them to Joseph Smith. They described their devotion to Smith's wife, whom they called their Whitema. It was Mrs. Smith, they said, who instructed them in the Christian faith. After Joseph Smith's death, the twins pledged loyalty to her, writing, "Where she goes, there will we go. Where she tarries, there will we halt." They compared their devotion to the biblical Ruth's devotion to Naomi. The pamphlet even included one of the songs they performed, along with letters and articles written about them. A newspaper editor praised their peculiar delicacy, modesty, and ingenuousness. A group of 5 physicians in Philadelphia certified their anatomy as genuine, not a hoax. Toward the end of the text, the sisters addressed the deepest question of their lives. Were they one person or two? They wrote, "Although we speak of ourselves in the plural, we feel as but one person. In fact, as such, we have ever been regarded, although we bear the names Millie and Christina." They declared they would never want separation, even if science could make it possible. "We have but one heart, one feeling in common, one desire, one purpose." In their 30s, after decades of travel, the sisters returned home to the very land where their story began. Their father had purchased the farm from the man who once enslaved them, and at last they had a place that was truly theirs. For a time, they lived quietly, rooted in the soil of their childhood. The years passed. In 1909, their home burned to the ground, forcing them to move once more. Their performing days slowed as age and illness crept in. By 1912, both were weakened by tuberculosis. On October 8, 1912, Millie's body could fight no more. Just 12 hours later, Christine followed her sister. Inseparable in life, they remained inseparable in death. They were buried together in an unmarked grave. It wasn't until 1969, more than half a century later, that they were moved to a cemetery in Whiteville and given a headstone. On it is carved the simple, haunting epitaph that captures their story better than any history book could. A soul with 2 thoughts. 2 hearts that beat as one. Millie and Christine McCoy's story is not just about their unusual birth. They endured a world that saw them first as property, then as curiosities. But in the end, they claimed their own dignity. They sang, they danced, they educated themselves, and they turned their greatest challenge into their greatest strength. And though they were conjoined in body, their story reminds us of something deeper, that 2 lives can share one soul, and that even in hardship, there can be harmony. Thank you for joining us on another journey to the past. See you next time on Hillbilly Files.